Maybe after it puts on this one, maybe something happened. Okay. I was thinking, what should I talk to this audience? Because if I go and talk in IEEE audience, I know that I must talk more in power related, renewable energy related stuff. But here we have SLAS, we have Inventors Commission, we have IEEE. So I was thinking, where should I pitch my talk? And I'm fortunate that I'm just following our UGC chairman, because he has made some remarkable connections for my presentation to go on. So I'm going to talk about the artificial intelligence based innovations for forecasting and control of COVID-19. And as you heard, that I am attached to Peradeniya University. Been there for a little while now. But this is very recently only we started move on to this particular topic, but artificial intelligence wasn't new. We have been applying artificial intelligence to many other areas. So I'm going to mix with my present work as well as my former work when I go through. And for the benefits of the young members and the familiar members of artificial intelligence, I thought I will pitch it in a slightly lower level. So I will give an introduction to AI techniques, why AI now, and our research on COVID AI, and recently acquired grant from IDRC Canada. I'm sure you all can remember this, machine versus man, Gary Kaspersky versus Deep Blue. This happened in 1997. I could remember that there was a fairly good publicity was given, because Gary Kaspersky was with some Russian origin, whereas IBM is Western origin. So they wanted to show that the Western brains are winning. And end of the day, of course, the computer won 2 games against this man. He was the champion that time. And then, one might think, okay, how comes that computer beat him? Computer doesn't have any intelligence in it. Of course, it's not the intelligence of the computer. The Deep Blue was developed by a team of IBM experts together with some chess masters. So what they did was they converted the knowledge in these experts into thousands and thousands of rules. And these rules were running in a computer. So it's not the knowledge running in a computer, it was the rules which were running in the. So that is where we call these rule-based examples. And I thought that I will take an example from my own field to introduce you the rule-based AI. What you are seeing here is what we call a DC microgrid. Now it's pathetic to see that today we generate electricity and using 2 types of sources. One is AC sources like our coal power plants, hydropower plants, and so on. At the same time, we are now seeing huge addition of solar PV. If the CB is now working on the new plan according to the government 70% requirement, and the CB, according to the CB plan, 1,000 megawatt of solar PV will be available on our system by 2022, in 2 years' time. Now, solar PV generate DC. Then what we do, we convert this DC into AC and bring it along the wires and then bring it to these buildings, and we use these LED lamps, and this one is not LED, these are still old lamps, but we use LED lamps which are DC again. So you convert DC into AC and then you invert DC into AC and then convert AC into DC. 2 conversion stages, unnecessary losses. So what we thought, why not directly use DC solar with DC loads? When you look at many loads today, our air conditioners are DC. Even though they are connected to AC, they are inverter operated DC devices. Our LED lamps are DC. All these computers are DC. That's why it comes with a box. The box is there to convert, and that box, if you touch it, it's heat. So it is just wasting energy every time. So we developed this system. And also we were supported by Sustainable Energy Authority. We managed to show that this is an ideal system for many commercial buildings like banks. If you look at banks today, their load is predominantly DC. They have lights, they have ACs, they have computers. They may have occasionally a kettle, but the bank, why they wanted to run on DC, AC? They can run on DC, and we showed that you can get an enormous energy improvement. But the problem is running a system like this. Remember, your load is varying. Your solar power varies with the clouds. Solar power varies over the day. So we need to make sure that the energy balance is maintained every single second. And also remember, your battery cannot be drained out below 20% of its charge. You cannot charge the battery above its 100% charging capacity. So we need to think about the energy management system. And then we develop an energy management system. But remember, you cannot work with the current reading. So we need some prediction. So we take the time step T, predict what's going to happen in next time step, and we schedule things accordingly. And for that, we develop what we call a rule-based energy management system. And you can see that we have come up with 4 modes. Export priority mode, where we have excess energy on our DC microgrid, so we can export the energy to the grid. We came up with import priority mode, where we don't have enough energy, so we need to import energy. We have energy storage priority mode, where where the price of electricity out there is expensive. It's better to consume electricity from your own battery. So we came up with that. And finally, the demand priority mode. So, and for each of these modes, we developed many other rules. And all these rules went into a microprocessor, and microprocessor basically decide what to do at every single time step. So these are what we call the rule-based systems. And we developed this system. It's up and running, but of course we could not apply this to any real system and run the case here. Maybe something that we need to look at for the sake of future. So what this rule-based system does, it's basically convert the knowledge inside humans using traditional software into a computer, and you then use your inputs and come up with desired outputs. But today we call AI something which a machine which can think better than this, and those are called machine learning AI. Now in machine learning AI, what we do is we use set of data. Remember, the data is the training data is the most important thing in machine learning AI. You need a good set of data to train your system. Once it is been trained, then it can take an input and give you an output. Let me come to an example straight away. Okay, before going into example, now this AI was there for long time. One of the key papers which people might say the kind of emergence of machine learning AI was this paper by A.M. Turner, The Computing Machinery and Intelligence, published in 1950. But when we were young, or when we were doing our engineering, AI wasn't in the mainstream. Nobody was talking about AI. But if you talk to somebody today, AI has become a common language today. Everybody is talking about AI. Why? Why people are so keen to talk about AI? Now, one main reason is the massive data that is available. As everybody is telling, COVID is a data-driven pandemic. You have enough data. Now, unfortunately, even though we have enough data in Sri Lanka, there is a tendency that people doesn't like to give data. Now, that is because of that reason, we are doing our research based on the data coming from Johns Hopkins Hospital in US. They have everything in open public. I have written to every single MAOH office to Health Ministry, still waiting for a reply, still not got any reply from our colleagues. So, I mean, some people think that these data, I mean, I know that even, I have the very good contact with CB, getting the data from CB also difficult. If I ask somebody in CB, certain hinda denna. But that's not kind of thing that has to be the case. It should be open to the public, so public can come up, not the public, at least the researchers can come up with innovative ideas. So here you can very clearly see what has happened in US. You can see this epidemiological curves that we developed. This is the death per 100K people, and you can see that states which are highly dense states had the first peak, the blue curve, and the blue states in the US. Then the bottom, the Texas and the states which are closer to the South America became the second peak. Now comes the third peak, which is the middle of the country, Iowa, that kind of. So you can predict what's going on in a country. I mean, we are slightly seeing that, okay, there was a huge boom of COVID cases in Gampaha, then came to Colombo. Now we can start seeing few more in Kandy. So it's kind of, if you have data, we can predict things. But unfortunately, as I told you, we are a little restricted with that luxury. Then the second reason why we are talking about AI is the increasing computing power. Now remember that the human brain has 10 to the 11 neurons with, and that can do, they are not like, they are not operating like a computer. So you cannot really compare as a, the floating point operations of a computer or something, but they can do 10 to the 17 operations per second. Whereas our normal computer can do today like 4 to 5, 10 into 10 to the 9 operations per second. There is one computer which is considered as the fastest computer in the world, which is the K computer developed by Japan, which has almost come closer to us, 10 to the 16 operations per second, but they have massive parallelism. I'll show you in the next slide how much cores they have. So in Peradeniya, the best computer that we have is 256 gigabit of RAM and 32 CPU cores. That is what we have at Peradeniya. You can see how much the K computer has. It is 1,400 terabytes of RAM and 705,024 CPU cores. So how many parallel computers are there to achieve that speed? Now the Google offers research credits. And sir, the UGC, if you can intervene, because the Sri Lanka cannot get Google credit. Sri Lankan researchers cannot get Google credit. I don't know why. So if we can see, and if you just get into that EDU Google programs credits research, you should be able to get Google credit and access their computer, which is 1,400 gigabyte of RAM and 224 CPU cores. Unfortunately, we cannot access that database, that particular cloud facility. But remember, you cannot access all that cloud facility. It's all depend on how much credit you have. I mean, if you have money, you can get more. So what as typical way, we were trying to get all our researchers pulled into this, but it didn't work. So that is something I think we should look at it. Then the third reason why AI is becoming common today is the improved machine learning algorithms. Now, there are broad families of machine learning algorithms. You can, if you talk to a AI expert, you will half the way you will lost yourself, where they will talk about all kind of algorithms which are beyond your capabilities. But remember, there are everything is depending on your training data. There are label data, as you are seeing from your if you are looking at your left hand side, you have label data and you have unlabeled data as you in your right hand side. Let me show you a AI application. Now this one is called supervised learning application, where you have data, label data. Now what we did was, one of the things which is happening in the world, with a lot of renewable being added into systems. Now, for example, if Sri Lanka is going to go with 70% renewable energy in our energy portfolio, we will have a severe problems of managing our power system. The reason is, even though 70% of renewable is there, if you have seen a wind power plant, they are working sometime, they are not working some other time. The reason is, when the wind is blowing, they are working. When the wind is not blowing, they are not working. And only God knows when the wind is blowing and when the wind is not blowing. Of course, our forecasting algorithms are now good enough to tell when the wind is blowing and when the wind is not blowing, but not before days ahead. We can accurately predict the wind in 3 to 4 hours ahead. But that is not good enough to change the way we consume energy, unless we have a good smart metering infrastructure which can intervene and tell the people, please make sure that you turn on your washing machine from 8:30 to 9:30, where there will be a lot of wind, where we don't have enough load to consume that energy. That kind of thing is not there. But that is happening in the world. If you go to California, there are now third-party markets to manipulate people's load. But in order to do that, you also need to know what the people are using. Now, there are two ways you can find out. One is what we call the intrusive load monitoring. You go into a house and try to understand what they are using. Now, what we were trying to do is what we call non-intrusive load monitoring. We just wanted to get one reading, the power reading and the voltage reading from the houses, and from there extract the features and tell that what appliances are working inside that house at that particular time. For that, we were using signatures of all the appliances. We were using 15 appliances, so we developed the signatures. Then we trained AI to recognize these signatures. Then from there, once you recognize that, once you come out of that recognition phase, you can now have an AI system which is trained to decompose the power and voltage signals and tell what is there in the house. So we developed this algorithm. So you use the trained AI, then you send the voltage and current signal which are in the bottom left, and we had a sliding window, and each window our decomposition algorithms will look for the trained database, look for the signatures and tell what is there at a particular time. And we had these 15 appliances in that particular house, and that, of course, we managed to publish one of the key journals in our field. Remember, unlike in medical or science, in engineering, if you can publish in a journal which has an impact factor of 10, which is very high. Okay, engineering 10 is very high, good journal. So this one has 9 point something. So you can see our accuracy. For each time window, it can very clearly say what are the combinations of appliances with the accuracy of more than 85%. So which is our, the supervised AI did. And of course, we applied for a local patent for this one, still waiting for that. Then also now with this COVID, we started working on the unsupervised AI. We are looking at the contact tracing algorithms, looking at vision based. I will come back to this slide in a minute later on. But basically what we wanted to see, using the CCTV footages, can we tell that there are possible severe contacts in a particular place? And the fourth reason why AI becomes very common today is the open source codes. You don't really need to develop anything. You just go and borrow the code, get the code and run your input data on that code. And you can see that what on your left-hand side, what we are using is an open post key point extractor to find out the finger points of people. Because if it is the COVID, we need to make sure what is touching somebody, and the most frequent place somebody will touch is your finger touching some other object. On the right hand side, you will see the YOLO version 4 is detecting people. So these are all open source software. We are not developing anything. We are just tell what we want. So this becomes make our life easier for one to use AI for different applications. And you can list many applications today that can use AI for pattern recognition, generating patterns and generating anomalies, predictions, and you can name it. Everywhere the AI has now gone into. Okay, let me now move on to our COVID-19 related work at Peradeniya. And I'm happy to say that, as our Professor Sampath Amatunga said, we are working as a team and not an engineering team. We have medical and social science mates working with us. We believe that research is all about teamwork. Nobody can do research alone unless, there are occasionally you will find some researchers who work alone. That is because mainly nobody else can work with them, not because that they are excellent. The best researchers are always work in teams. And I'm not probably boasting. The Peradeniya has enormous resource of multi-diversity. We don't get together, it's very hard that you can find research, the research work within Peradeniya where you find one from arts faculty, one from medical faculty, and one from engineering faculty. Very hard. But we were managed to pull out this, and this project is just started. Okay, we are trying to struggle to start. I will come back to that in a minute. So we have a good team working on with us. I'm leading the team right now. One of the things we are doing is we are developing the predictive models for COVID-19. What we do is we take the post-COVID-19 data and the socio-economic variables and the geographic locations, and we are using AI forecasting model to forecast the future COVID-19 information. And as I told you, we are still working with the US data. Here you can see one of our predictive model, which is a very simple two-layer neural network that can tell whether a particular state has a the low severity, very low severity, moderate severity, or very high severity. So that is what it gives out. So you can see that then the New York came up with a high severity, obviously with the data that we have and the demographic information. And also we look at the various correlation with these various demographic information on these outputs. And also you can see here we took 3 states and we develop our prediction models, and you can see towards the end from 13.8 onward, we are running our prediction model together with the known data we have. And you can see that there is a very good correlation. Our AIs can predict the future COVID cases pretty closer to the actual cases. So that's another piece of work we do. And also, as I told you, we are looking for contact hotspot which are vulnerable, particularly looking at the factory environments where there could be a lot of contact hotspots which are challenging to locate. Remember, we are using CCTV footages, and they are 2D view, and they are not 2D view looking like that direction. They are looking at some obscure direction. So we need to generate exact 3D information from that 2D footage. So that is what we are trying to do. But remember, as I told you, we are not developing any tools. The tools are out there. So the one tool we are using is the key point extractor, which can tell, you can see that it can very correctly figure out where the fingers are. But the problem is, we using the CCTV footage, you don't know whether a particular person is closer to another person because you don't have that depth information. So we use a Manicure Challenge depth estimator to look at the depth. And once you put 2 together, you should be able to work out whether a finger is touching or not. Now it is like using the visual images. Doing this using one camera is difficult, but that's the challenge we will have, because in a factory you only have CCTV footages. And if a particular person became COVID positive, and if you wanted to find out in past 10 days, what are the active contacts he or she had, you need to use the CCTV footages. Of course, you can talk to him and get some information, but CCTV footages are there right through the day the factory will be recording them. So you go back to those footages, run these algorithms, and see whom that particular person had direct contact during the active period. That is what we wanted to find out. Then that can minimize the test. Right now, you just find out people, bring 300 people and do PCR test, and then, it is, the PCR test is a cost to the government. It's not come free. So you need to, if you can optimize the PCR test while randomly doing few, I think that is the best. So that is what we are trying to do. The next one is the computer vision for identify social distancing violations. Again, we are using one software to locate the people. You can see that this software is pretty good in locating people. The boxes indicate people. Then we will look at video footage and look at how these people are moving and see whether it's a family of friends coming together all the way. Now, if that is the case, of course, you know that they have been together before also, so they are not a risky encounter. But if we are coming with a case where you have a footage, in this footage, if you look at like these red spots, where there are many people moving around, and if we can really work out using our, the touch estimator that there were, the contacts, and then, if we found that one day there was a COVID positive case on one of those places, you can easily locate now remember in our like, even though I'm showing you some of the figures, you cannot find out faces. In our research, what we are doing is we are converting these people into a skeleton structure. But for this presentation, I thought the skeleton wouldn't be that nice. So that is why I came up with the pictures, because nobody can recognize anybody there. And obviously, this is, I think, somewhere in Oxford. None of us knows who is there at Oxford. So that's perfectly all right. But whenever we are using our data, we first convert the people into skeletons. Skeleton in the sense, not the medical skeletons, just, some. Okay, this is coming back to this project. This is a new project that we got from Canadian, like we were selected for Canadian funding. This is where the team was put up. The artificial intelligence framework for threat assessment and containment for COVID-19 and future epidemics, while mitigating the socio-economic impact to women, children, and underprivileged groups. And you very clearly see that this guy is an engineer. He doesn't know what is socio-economic impact. That's why we have sociologists. And we don't know much about COVID-19. That's why we have COVID experts. We are the hardcore AI experts. We only do that part of the job, and that is where the real. I'll show you. They have only selected 7 projects from the world to fund, and I'm sure they have seen the strength of the group. Otherwise, they wouldn't, select us. And it is basically University of Peradeniya. UNITEN is University of Tenaga in Malaysia, but they are only leading. They have many other universities in Malaysia, and the Institute of Policy Studies here. Of course, I'm not going to go into the objectives. This is basically the work packages we have. We have comprehensive data collection work. We will be collect past behavior patterns, present behavior patterns, collision data, and socio-economic and demographic data. That will go into our AI systems. But of course, you need to validate the data. You need to arrange the data to be used with our AI system. And the AI will give us output such as impact study, collision emulation, spatio-temporal forecasting, susceptibility of each group, contact tracing strategies, and threat level assessment. And then in the last work package, we wanted to talk to our stakeholders and fine-tune our AI, and then inform the policy what is the best containment strategy for particular socioeconomic group. Now, remember, right now we don't really consider the many factors. All we are doing is blanket. We just lock down an area. But if we can go into more detail, and as like in Malaysia, they have 4 bands, and these bands, they use different ways of containing different areas. And as you can see that they have selected 7 research groups for this project. We are the only group from Asia. And tonight, directly after this, I have to go online for the inception workshop of this project. But I think I must request the help of the UGC, because we are stuck with this circular. I must thank the Vice Chancellor. I received the grant agreement on 14th October. And we went through all the legal bodies within the university and submitted to the UGC on 24th October. And UGC was pretty quick, I must tell you, even though it was looked down. Shamika was very helpful and pushed it through to the ministry. But now it is hanging around in ministries and many days, and I'm very much like upset to go to the inception workshop tonight because we still can't even think of when we are going to sign this agreement. So I think the SLAS has a, we need to, as SLAS, we need to do a big deliberation, because the research will not move forward if this I can see the essence of the circular, but for the research, we are working with global community. And as Professor Sampath very correctly said, we are looking at in the global bunch. And if we are going to stagnate like this due to I'm not blaming anybody, but it is the typical system that we have. Now, what happened was this agreement went into Foreign Affairs. They came up with some comments, but these are international bodies, and I send it to the international body. They say, okay, you can't do it. Then I had to send it back to now Foreign Affairs. Now Foreign Affairs has to come back and tell me what to do next. So it's a bit of a, the deadlock right now. So I think as researchers, we must make a deliberation on this particular aspect. Otherwise, I mean, I can see these figures that Professor Sampath Amartunga is telling as collectively what is happening in each and every university. But also we need to remember that each and every university has few very active researchers who has been contributing to the figures that you are showing, whereas there are so many who are sleeping. And people like us who has been, very active doing research, and I'm glad that I'm also in that top 2% list now. We are really get frustrated when, something that is beyond our, this is not what I'm supposed to do, but I have to phone these people every day and say, what's happening? So it's a bit of a, so I think, I thought that this is some point where I must use my keynote to point this out, so that we, as a research community, we can get out and tell the, the authorities, please, we need to do something. So in conclusion, as I told you, artificial intelligence is emergent as a powerful tool, not because of one reason, many reasons: the improved computing power, open source tools, many different algorithms developed by computer specialists. And we are at Peradeniya, we have been working predominantly on AI application on engineering side. But with this COVID, we moved on to COVID-related activities, and we put up this team, and we started working on the COVID-related application. And that is where I think it fits into this theme, because I consider it as an innovation where we never bother to talk to other peoples and put up a proposal like this. And we are now working on the pandemic models and vision-based AI and computer vision for social distancing identification. And I believe that with the recent grant we got, it's a 2-year grant, we should be able to inform the policy in better way using our AI tools. Thank you very much for your time.